one of the unique advantages of your work in DEI from such a high level are the trends that you've been able to observe within this work, and also surrounding even just public conversations related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're now in December 2021, and it honestly feels like a lifetime ago when the main concern for Republicans was affirmative action. Because today, the current discourse is dominated by critical race theory,
Um,
CRT, CRT, CRT. And I'm curious, like from your vantage point, what is your diagnosis of the critical race theory movement? Did you anticipate this thing happening a few years ago? Did it seem like it was sort of on the rise? What's your take?
so those are great questions, by the way. And I should disclose that I am a Kimberly Crenshaw fangirl, and Kimberly Crenshaw is one of the people who is credited with founding critical race theory. And to be clear, critical race theory is something that's taught in law school. Even if it's taught, I took sociology and anthropology, and I took it at Spelman and at Bryn Mawr, and both of those places studied um, Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and folks, but that still wasn't critical race theory, right? Like we read some of their ideas and some of their thoughts, some of their books, but we weren't learning it from a law perspective. And so I feel like that needs to be named because, if you get into the argument about semantics and the fact that they're pushing this false narrative, you're already kind of losing. I think really to even have the argument over critical race theory is kind of a losing argument in a lot of ways. And yet I completely get pulled into it.
100%, 100%. I know it's bait, but
Yeah, I totally get baited. But and that's because it really hits a chord for everyone, right?
Mhm.
We know that, in terms of oppression, and if you don't mind just kind of like letting me just kind of read off like a little list of things I have, like in terms of oppression, one of the number one things that was done to folks, and this is why it's such a hot button topic, right, was of course they stole land from folks, they oppressed folks, and of course they brought people over and they enslaved them, and then of course there were the internment camps, which are kind of still happening today in Texas. And so there's this history, right? It is child separation 101, and then once it's child separation, right, this is like race 101, right, child separation. And then once you have child separation, you have these policies that stop them from having their traditional haircuts, their traditional clothes. They can't speak their language. They can't practice their religion. They can't share their knowledge. They can't use their medicine, right? And this is back to science, right? They can't use their medicine. Their bodies are no longer theirs. And so they don't have autonomy and control over even their bodies. And so, this hits a topic for folks who, have experienced colonization or oppression in multiple ways. And this also like kind of calls on the genetic traumatization that a lot of folks have right now. At the same time, we know what's happening, right? This is the whitewashing. This is just another name for the traditional whitewashing that I just talked about, right? And so it's nothing new. It has a new name. They latched onto it. I mean, I don't even understand the Marxism that they're talking about.
Oh gosh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's like
Wait,
they're
what?
kind of making up all these falsehoods so that they can really scare people, right? That's the thing. They're taking out their bullhorn and they're just trying to use what they know works, which is fear and division. And it is kind of working. There are lots of folks that don't want to be seen as bad, right? They don't want their families to be seen as bad. They don't want to feel guilty for something that they feel they didn't do. And the truth of the matter is, we were all born into the system, right? So even if they didn't do it, they're in the system. And now we just kind of have to clean it up. And so that's pretty much where we are. It's this bullhorn, it's a dog whistle, it's whatever you want to call it. It works because historical and it's also current, right? This is the thing. We're always saying, well, the history, and we do need to talk about the history. And this is what it's trying to erase. They know how powerful this history is. And they know how powerful it is for people to understand this history. And they know how powerful it was for everyone to be working remote and having time to see it, right? Everyone's getting pushed back into their offices. It's almost as if last year was a fever dream. Like it didn't even happen. So I
Mhm.
think it's something that I'm hoping will lose its momentum. I'm hoping that if we just kind of keep talking about the need to communicate and be transparent, and how to work that into curriculums, we do need to work it into curriculums. It has to be part of school for children. It has to be part of college. It has to be part of, honestly, our work environments as well. Real estate, people who work in real estate, they need to know about redlining, right? People who work in medicine, they need to understand that there were alternative medicines that people were not allowed to use, even during the Anthropocene, which was like yesteryear's pandemic, right? So there are and there was a lot of technology lost, right? And so I think, kind of understanding that background, but also understanding that we can't give any more air to it. Now, having said that, I am worried because one of the things that came out of that was that memorandum that the last administration put out saying that these things couldn't be discussed and federally funded. Like if anyone discussed them, funding was pulled. And that affected me, right? That affected me as a DEI consultant. But that affected me more as a mom and as an aunt.
Mhm.
I'm very concerned about future generations and they're not understanding things. I mean, the stats that came out on people who thought the Holocaust was fake was shocking, right? So we clearly need to keep talking about these things because not everyone has the experience of having a great uncle who fought in World War II, right? Or who experienced the internment camps, and not everyone has the experience of having a grandmother that worked in the factories, while everyone else was away. So it does have to keep, the conversation going.
Yeah, I mean, you talk you bringing up the fact that you know, sometimes even just having the conversation is already a losing game. It hits me in the feels because I talk about it, but it's one of those difficult things where it's like someone threw trash on your lawn, and yeah, you didn't put the trash there, but someone's gonna have to get it, and it's you're going to have to sort of clean it up. You're going to have to sort of discuss it, especially since it's so impactful and it's having this effect